Hello there, and welcome to The Sleepy Scholar. Tonight's journey takes us into the strange and fascinating world of animal sleep. We will discover how dolphins rest with half their brains awake, how birds can sleep while flying, and how creatures of land, sea, and sky have shaped sleep to fit their strange and beautiful lives. If you enjoy these quiet explorations, consider subscribing so you can easily return here whenever you need to rest. For now, get comfortable. Let your eyes grow heavy. Let's begin. Dolphins sleep with only half of the brain at a time. In the open sea, sleep cannot be a full surrender because a dolphin must keep rising for air and must stay alert to the movement of its pod. So evolution shaped a remarkable compromise. One hemisphere of the brain drifts into slow wave sleep, while the other remains awake enough to guide swimming and breathing. The eye opposite the waking half often stays open, as if one small lamp were left burning in a vast marine house. This pattern is called unihemispheric sleep, and it allows rest without losing the thread of motion. A bottlenose dolphin can measure around 8 to 13 feet long, or about 2.5 to 4 meters. Yet even such a powerful body depends on this delicate rhythm. In dolphin sleep, rest is not an absence of vigilance. It is vigilance softened, divided, and made graceful by the sea. Great frigate birds can sleep while flying above the ocean. These birds spend days and sometimes weeks over tropical waters, gliding on rising air and watching for chances to steal food or snatch prey near the surface. Over such immense distances, the sky becomes both roadway and resting place. Researchers found that frigate birds take very short bouts of sleep in flight, sometimes with one hemisphere of the brain resting, and sometimes with both resting briefly during steady soaring. The total can be astonishingly small, often well under an hour a day while airborne. Their wings can stretch roughly 7 feet across, or about 2.1 meters, turning small adjustments of feather and bone into hours of effortless glide. What looks like tireless motion is really a fine negotiation with wind, gravity, and need. The frigate bird does not leave the air to find a bedroom. It borrows stillness from the moving sky itself. Sea otters often sleep floating on their backs, wrapped in kelp or linked to one another. Along cold Pacific coasts, the water is rich, restless, and always tugging. For a small marine mammal that feeds, grooms, and even gives birth at sea, drifting away during sleep would be a real danger. So sea otters use the forest beneath the waves as an anchor. They may wind strands of kelp around their bodies or rest in rafts where companions hold paws to stay together. An adult sea otter is about 3 to 5 feet long, or roughly 1 to 1.5 meters, and its famously dense fur traps air like a dark velvet life jacket. Sleep here is a floating kind of trust, part botany and part friendship. The kelp keeps watch from below, and the group keeps watch from beside them. Even on the open water, their rest becomes a woven thing. Sperm whales often sleep suspended upright in the water like drifting pillars. Far below the surface, these giants dive to hunt squid in a realm of pressure and darkness that few mammals could endure. Yet when they rest, they sometimes gather near the surface and become nearly motionless, hanging nose up or head up in the sea. Observers have found groups of sperm whales in these quiet vertical bouts for several minutes at a time, creating one of the strangest sleeping postures in the animal world. A large male can reach about 52 feet or 16 meters, so the image is less like a fish at rest and more like a living monument paused between worlds. They are not anchored, not sleeping on ground, not hidden in nests. they simply rise into stillness. In that posture, the ocean seems to hold its breath around them, and the whale becomes part creature, part dark column of time. Giraffes sleep very little compared with many other mammals. On the African savanna, a tall body is both an advantage and a responsibility. Height grants a view across grasslands and thorn trees, but it also makes lying down and standing up slower and more awkward than it is for smaller animals. Wild giraffes often sleep for only a few hours in total over a day, usually in short bouts rather than one long stretch. They may doze standing, and for deeper sleep they sometimes fold their legs beneath them and curve the neck so the head rests on the rump. A giraffe can stand about 18 feet tall, or roughly 5.5 meters, and such grandeur is not easily lowered to earth. Their sleep is sparse, economical, and carefully timed. Even rest on the savanna must fit inside a tall architecture of caution, elegance, and exposed horizon. Elephants can doze standing up, but they usually lie down for the deepest sleep. Across forests and grasslands, elephants carry immense bodies, intricate memories, and constant social awareness. Their days are full of travel, feeding, bathing, and keeping contact with family. So sleep often comes in modest fragments rather than long, unbroken hours. Standing rest is useful because it allows a quick response, and their limbs can support much of that quiet stillness. But rapid eye movement sleep, the stage linked with vivid brain activity, usually happens when an elephant reclines on the ground. An African bush elephant may stand around 10 to 13 feet at the shoulder, or about 3 to 4 meters, making the act of lying down no small decision. When such a giant settles fully, the landscape seems to change shape with it. Their sleep reveals a balance between weight and vulnerability, power, and the simple need to let gravity finally win. Ducks at the edge of a group often sleep with one eye open. On lakes, marshes, and shorelines, safety is rarely shared equally. A bird tucked into the middle of a flock is sheltered by neighbors on every side, but a bird on the outer rim faces open space where danger may arrive first. Studies of ducks have shown that those in the exposed positions keep the eye facing outward. Open more often and let the opposite half of the brain sleep more deeply. This is another form of one-sided vigilance, a quiet division of labor inside a small feathered head. A mallard is only about 2 feet long, or 60 centimeters, yet it manages a surveillance system elegant enough to rival machinery. Group sleep becomes a shifting geometry of trust. The flock is not only a gathering of bodies, it is a rotating wall of awareness, where rest and lookout pass from bird to bird, like moonlight across water. Fur seals can sleep with one half of the brain at a time when they are in the water. For an air-breathing mammal that feeds at sea but also comes ashore, sleep must change with place. In the ocean, a seal may need to keep paddling gently, maintain posture, and continue surfacing to breathe. So unihemispheric sleep becomes useful. On land, many fur seals can return to sleeping with both brain hemispheres at once, like more typical mammals. This flexibility is one of the most striking examples of sleep reshaped by environment from one setting to another. A northern fur seal can grow to around 7 feet long, or about 2.1 meters, and yet its most impressive adaptation may be invisible from the outside. The same animal carries more than one sleeping plan. Sea and shore ask different questions, and the seal answers each with a different version of rest. Horses can sleep standing up, but they still need to lie down for certain stages of sleep. On open grasslands, speed has always been one of the horse's great defenses, and a body built for running benefits from being able to rest without fully collapsing. Specialized tendons and ligaments in the legs create what is called the stay apparatus, allowing a horse to lock into a stable standing posture while dozing. Yet this clever engineering has limits. For rapid eye movement sleep, when muscles relax much more deeply, horses generally need to lie flat or nearly flat. A typical horse stands about 5 to 6 feet at the head, or around 1.5 to 1.8 meters, and carries that height on elegantly narrow supports. Standing sleep preserves readiness, but deeper sleep asks for trust in the ground. Even the swiftest hooves eventually yield to earth, and only there can the horse rest completely. Bats sleep upside down because their bodies are built to launch downward into flight. In caves, hollow trees, and shadowed rafters, bats gather in places where the ceiling is safer than the floor. Hanging head down keeps them away from many predators and gives them a simple way to begin flying. They let go, drop, and open their wings. Their hind limbs are adapted for gripping while roosting, and many species spend most of the day in this inverted rest. Some little brown bats are only about 3 to 4 inches long, or 8 to 10 centimeters, with wingspans near 9 to 11 inches, or 23 to 28 centimeters. Yet entire colonies can make a cavern feel like a breathing tapestry. What seems unnatural to us is ordinary geometry to a bat. Sleep does not always seek a bed below. Sometimes it trusts the dark above and lets gravity become a doorway rather than a threat. Sloths sleep hanging from trees, but wild sloths do not sleep as much as old legends claimed. For a long time, sloths were famous as emblems of endless drowsiness, and captive animals sometimes seem to confirm the story by sleeping for very long periods. Later studies of wild sloths showed a subtler truth. In nature, they often sleep far less than captive sloths, sometimes around 9 or 10 hours a day, rather than 15 or more. Their slow lifestyle is tied to a low-energy diet of leaves, careful digestion, and a body designed for life in the canopy. A 3-toed sloth measures roughly 18 to 24 inches long, or about 45 to 60 centimeters, and its curved claws make hanging feel secure rather than precarious. The tree becomes both road and resting chamber. The sloth sleep is not laziness made flesh. It is energy measured carefully, like a clock that chooses patience over haste. Emperor penguins can survive on thousands of microsleeps instead of long, continuous sleep. On the Antarctic ice, conditions can be severe, crowded, and full of competing demands from weather, predators, eggs, and chicks. For a bird balancing duty and survival in such a place, long, uninterrupted sleep may be a luxury. Recent observations have shown that emperor penguins often take very brief naps, sometimes only a few seconds long, over and over across the day. Added together, these tiny installments can provide substantial rest. An emperor penguin stands about 4 feet tall, or roughly 1.2 meters, and on that frozen stage, even a few seconds of stillness can matter. Their sleep is gathered like snowflakes, each one small, but together enough to change the landscape. Rest does not always arrive as a single dark curtain. Sometimes it comes as countless soft taps of silence on the white edge of the world. Bees sleep, and some even doze while clinging to flowers or stems. Insects are often imagined as tiny machines, all movement and appetite. But bees have daily rhythms that include clear periods of rest. During sleep, their posture changes, their antennae droop, and they respond less quickly to disturbances. Solitary bees and bumblebees may be seen gripping vegetation with their jaws or legs through the night, suspended like small lanterns that have gone dim. A honeybee is only about half an inch long, or roughly 1.2 centimeters, yet its rest matters to a sophisticated life of navigation, communication, and memory. Sleep helps support the precision of the waggle dance and the timing of foraging. The meadow after sunset is not empty of industry. It is full of paused intention. Even among petals and pollen, the living world keeps an hour when wings fall quiet and labor becomes stillness. Octopuses can show active sleep, with changing colors and twitching arms, as if dreams have become briefly visible on the skin. In the dim shelters of reefs and rocky sea floors, octopuses spend their waking lives solving problems, hunting, hiding, and reshaping themselves against the background. Their nervous systems are remarkably complex, with much of that neural richness spread through the arms as well as the central brain. During rest, researchers have observed alternating quiet periods and more active episodes in which the body flickers through patterns, the suckers move, and the eyes twitch. A common octopus may span around 3 feet from arm tip to arm tip, or about 1 meter. Though sizes vary widely by species. These sleeping displays do not let us read an octopus mind with certainty, but they hint at vivid internal activity. Here sleep is not always stillness. Sometimes it is a private tide, washing colors across a body made for mystery. Jellyfish have a sleep-like state, even though they do not have a brain. Drifting through oceans for hundreds of millions of years, jellyfish belong to an ancient lineage whose bodies are simple in some ways and astonishing in others. They have no central brain, yet they show daily rhythms of activity and rest. Studies on species such as the upside-down jellyfish found that they pulse less at night, respond more slowly when disturbed, and show rebound rest after deprivation, which are hallmark features of sleep. Many upside-down jellyfish are about 4 to 8 inches across, or roughly 10 to 20 centimeters, like living saucers set gently on the seafloor. Their sleep-like behavior suggests that the roots of rest may be older than complex brains themselves. Before there were dreams as mammals know them, there was already a rhythm of action and quiet. Even a body made mostly of water keeps faith with the turning of day and night. Some sharks sleep by resting motionless on the seafloor, proving that not all sharks must swim endlessly to survive. The old image of the sleepless shark, forever in motion, contains a grain of truth for certain species that rely on constant swimming to move water over their gills. But shark life is more varied than legend allows. Nurse, sharks, wobbegongs, and several other species can rest on the bottom and keep breathing by pumping water across the gills or by using openings called spiracles. A nurse shark can grow about 7 to 10 feet long, or roughly 2 to 3 meters, and may spend daylight hours tucked under ledges or among rocks in quiet repose. Their stillness changes the mood of the seafloor entirely. The shark becomes less like a dart and more like a shadow with patience. Sleep, or near sleep, in such animals shows that even ancient predators contain deep reserves of calm. Platypuses spend an unusually large share of sleep in a stage that resembles rapid eye movement sleep. In the rivers and creeks of eastern Australia, the platypus already seems assembled from several different stories: a mammal with fur, a bill, webbed feet, and egg-laying ancestry, its sleep is just as astonishing. Early studies found that platypuses can spend many hours in a highly active sleep state, with twitching and strong brain activity, much more than many adult mammals do. A platypus is usually about 17 to 20 inches long, or roughly 43 to 50 centimeters, not counting the grandeur of its strangeness. Because monotremes branch very early on the mammal family tree, their sleep may preserve clues about how mammalian sleep evolved. In this small river hunter, ancient biology still speaks softly. The platypus lies in its burrow like a footnote from deep time, and even its dreams seem older than they should be. Some swifts may sleep on the wing, taking brief rest while gliding high above the land. Swifts are birds of extraordinary aerial commitment. They feed in flight, caught in flight, and can remain airborne for very long periods, especially outside the breeding season. Evidence from tracking and brain studies in related species suggests that at least some swifts may manage short episodes of sleep while soaring, likely during stable glides at high altitude. This would make sense in a life where landing is infrequent and costly. The common swift is about 6 to 7 inches long, or 16 to 17 centimeters, with a wingspan near 15 to 17 inches, or 38 to 42 centimeters, a scythe-shaped frame made for sky. We should be careful not to imagine hours of deep sleep up there. The likely reality is briefer and more delicate. Even so, the idea remains wonderful. A bird so faithful to air that it learns how to rest without leaving it. Flamingos can sleep while standing on one leg. In shallow lagoons and salt lakes, flamingos spend their days filtering food from the water and moving through bright, reflective landscapes that seem almost made of light. When they rest, they often tuck one leg up into the body and balance on the other, sometimes with the head turned back into the feathers. This posture helps reduce muscular effort through clever body mechanics, and it may also help conserve heat by reducing the amount of bare leg exposed to water and air. A greater flamingo can stand about 4 to 5 feet tall, or roughly 1.2 to 1.5 meters, turning that single-legged silhouette into a kind of living calligraphy against the marsh. Their sleep looks improbable, yet it is stable and efficient. In the flamingo, elegance is not decoration. It is structure. The strange pose is not a performance, but a practical masterpiece, written in bone, tendon, and balance. Parrotfish sleep inside a mucus cocoon that they secrete around their bodies at night. On coral reefs, daylight is loud with color, grazing, and constant negotiation among species. When darkness falls, many fish become vulnerable, and resting safely can require unusual strategies. Several parrotfish species settle into crevices or sheltered spots and release a transparent mucus envelope that surrounds them like a delicate sleeping bag. Scientists think this cocoon may help mask chemical cues from predators and parasites, though details can vary by species. A stoplight parrotfish can reach about 2 feet long, or around 60 centimeters, and by day it helps shape reefs by scraping algae and bits of coral with its beak-like mouth. By night, that busy grazer turns into a hidden sleeper wrapped in its own invention. The reef never stops being inventive. Even sleep there can become an act of chemistry, spun softly around a resting body like a curtain of living glass. Walruses can sleep floating upright in the water by using inflatable air sacs in the throat. In the Arctic and subarctic, a walrus lives between sea and ice, always negotiating cold water, shifting flows, and long stretches of travel. Rest in such a world has to be practical as well as peaceful. One of the walrus's clever tools is a pair of pharyngeal sacs, expandable pouches connected to the throat that can help with buoyancy and sound. When filled with air, these sacs can help keep the head above water, allowing the animal to bob vertically while sleeping like a great brown boy. A large male walrus may grow about 10 to 12 feet long, or roughly 3 to 3.7 meters, and can weigh more than a small car. Yet even with that mass, it can drift with surprising delicacy. The sea does not always demand motion. Sometimes it simply asks the walrus to trust the cold water to hold its dreaming weight. Manatees often sleep underwater and rise to breathe without fully waking. In warm coastal shallows, estuaries, and spring-fed rivers, these slow herbivores move through water like rounded fragments of the landscape itself. Their days are shaped by grazing, gentle travel, and the search for warm refuge, especially in cooler seasons. When they rest, they usually settle below the surface or float quietly, and because they are mammals, they still must breathe air. A sleeping manatee can surface for a breath and sink back down again with little sign of full alertness, as if the body were following an old remembered path. A West Indian manatee may reach about 10 feet long, or 3 meters, and weigh around 1,000 pounds, or 450 kilograms. Yet its breathing rhythm can remain astonishingly soft. In this way, sleep becomes stitched into motion. Even rest has a tide, and the manatee follows it with serene, ancient patience. Crocodiles can sleep with one eye open, using half the brain to stay more alert. Along riverbanks, wetlands, and muddy shores, a crocodile often appears to be doing almost nothing at all. Yet stillness in such an animal is rarely emptiness. It is a waiting stillness, full of information. Studies of crocodilians suggest that they can sometimes keep one eye open, especially when other crocodiles are nearby, or when a potential disturbance is present. And this behavior resembles the one-sided vigilance seen in some birds and marine mammals. That open eye is often directed toward the interesting part of the world, while the animal otherwise remains at rest. A Nile crocodile can grow to around 16 feet, or nearly 5 meters, though many are smaller, and even a quieter individual carries the authority of old stone. Sleep here is not a surrender of watchfulness. It is a thin veil laid over it, like dusk over a river that never truly stops listening. Cuttlefish show an active sleep state in which their skin patterns flicker and their bodies twitch. In seagrass beds, reefs, and sandy coastal waters, cuttlefish move through the sea like living thoughts, changing color and texture with astonishing speed. Their skin can bloom into stripes, clouds, and mottled disguises while awake, helping them hide, hunt, and communicate. During rest, researchers have seen periods of quiet stillness interrupted by bursts of activity in which the skin flashes through patterns, the arms twitch, and the eyes move beneath closed-looking lids. This active state appears distinct from quieter rest and may be analogous to the more dynamic sleep phases seen in vertebrates. A common cuttlefish is often around 8 to 20 inches long, or 20 to 50 centimeters, depending on species and sex. Even asleep, it seems reluctant to become plain. The body continues speaking in color. The cuttlefish turns rest into a small private theater where the curtain never fully closes. Fruit flies sleep, and their sleep can be measured, disrupted, and recovered much like sleep in larger animals. At first glance, a fruit fly seems too small for anything as grand and mysterious as sleep. It darts, lands, feeds, and vanishes with the tempo of a spark. Yet in laboratories, fruit flies have revealed clear cycles of rest. When they sleep, they become immobile, less responsive to stimulation, and after being deprived of that rest, they show rebound sleep later. This makes them unexpectedly valuable for studying the biology of sleep and circadian rhythm. A fruit fly is only about 1/8 of an inch long, or roughly 3 millimeters. But inside that tiny body are genes and neural circuits that help scientists investigate how sleep is controlled. The scale is almost comical, but the meaning is profound. Even a creature that can stand on the head of a pin carries a nightly claim to stillness, proving that sleep is one of life's deepest shared inheritances. Zebrafish sleep without eyelids, proving that closed eyes are not required for real rest. In streams and shallow waters of South Asia, zebrafish move in small glimmering groups, striped like tiny currents of ink and silver. They have become famous in science because they are easy to study, develop quickly, and reveal a great deal about vertebrate biology. When night comes, zebrafish reduce their movement, settle into characteristic resting postures, and become harder to rouse, all hallmarks of genuine sleep. Because they have no eyelids, nothing dramatic seems to happen to the face, and yet the brain and body clearly enter a different state. A typical zebrafish is only about 1 to 2 inches long, or 2.5 to 5 centimeters, a jewel-sized animal carrying important biological clues. Their sleep reminds us that rest does not need familiar furniture. No blanket of lids descends, and still the quiet arrives, steady and complete, in the little striped lantern of the fish. White-crowned sparrows can drastically reduce how much they sleep during migration. For much of the year, these sparrows live by ordinary avian standards, feeding, singing, and sleeping in the usual rhythm of day and night. But migration changes the terms of life. During those seasons of long-distance travel, when the map of the sky becomes urgent and the route itself must be remembered, white-crowned sparrows can function on far less sleep than they do at other times. Laboratory studies have shown that during migratory periods, they become more active at night and show a striking reduction in sleep, yet may still perform surprisingly well on certain tasks. The bird itself is modest, only about 6 to 7 inches long, or 15 to 18 centimeters, but migration turns it into a vessel of endurance. Sleep is not discarded entirely. It is compressed, bent, and rationed. In the sparrow, the season of movement teaches the brain a rare and temporary form of thrift. Koalas sleep for much of the day because their leafy diet yields energy slowly and sparingly. In eucalyptus forests, the koala lives among leaves that are abundant but difficult. Eucalyptus is fibrous, chemically defended, and not especially rich in easy energy. So the koala survives by doing less, digesting carefully, and moving with deliberate economy. This is why koalas are often seen resting for long stretches, sometimes 18 to 20 hours in a day, though the exact amount varies with age, season, and circumstance. Their sleep and quiet wakefulness are part of a whole energy-saving strategy rather than a simple excess of laziness. A koala is usually about 24 to 33 inches long, or 60 to 85 centimeters, with a body perfectly shaped for gripping trunks and forks in the branches. In that posture, a tree becomes both ladder and bedroom. The koala teaches a very old lesson. When food is slow, life itself may slow to meet it. Meerkats sleep in communal burrows, often huddled together in underground chambers. Above ground, the world of a meerkat is bright, exposed, and full of scanning. These small mongooses stand upright to watch for danger, coordinate in groups, and move through open habitat where being noticed can be fatal. But when night falls, they descend into a different architecture. Their burrow systems can include sleeping chambers below the surface, where the air is more stable and the group can curl together for warmth and security. A meerkat stands only about 10 to 14 inches tall, or 25 to 35 centimeters, yet its social life is grandly organized. Huddling reduces heat loss and turns many small bodies into one shared source of comfort. By day, the colony is a ring of lookout posts. By night, it becomes a woven knot of fur beneath the sand. Sleep here is not solitary escape. It is a communal shelter, hidden from moonlight and held together by closeness. Arctic ground squirrels do not simply sleep through winter, because hibernation is deeper and stranger than ordinary sleep. In the far north, winter is not a passing inconvenience, but a season of prolonged cold, darkness, and scarcity. To survive it, Arctic ground squirrels enter hibernation, lowering body temperature to extraordinary levels and slowing metabolism dramatically. At times, their body temperature can fall below the freezing point of water. Those special adaptations prevent their tissues from turning to ice. Yet hibernation is not identical to normal sleep. During the long season, these squirrels periodically arouse, warming themselves back up before returning to torpor, and scientists believe sleep still plays a role during those warmer intervals. The squirrel itself is only about 12 to 16 inches long, or 30 to 40 centimeters, including the tail. But its winter physiology is monumental in implication. It does not merely rest through the cold. It changes the tempo of life itself, almost vanishing into the mathematics of survival. Albatrosses can sleep on the ocean surface, letting the open sea become their bed. These great ocean wanderers are built for distance, with long, narrow wings that let them harvest wind over immense stretches of water. They may travel thousands of miles or thousands of kilometers in journeys that seem to redraw the map of the world with each season. While some short rest may occur during flight in certain seabirds, albatrosses are known to spend significant sleeping time while floating on the sea itself, especially when conditions allow. There, the bird rides the surface between passages of travel and feeding, trusting buoyancy where other birds might fear exposure. A wandering albatross can have a wingspan of about 8 to 11 feet, or 2.5 to 3.5 meters, one of the largest of any living bird. Yet for all that grandeur, it sometimes sleeps in the simplest cradle imaginable. The ocean that carries its journeys also holds its quietest hours. Hippos can sleep in water and rise for air in near automatic rhythm. In African rivers and pools, the hippopotamus spends much of the day submerged, using water to keep cool while the sun burns above the banks. Though it can look like a creature of pure heaviness, the hippo is surprisingly well adapted to this amphibious pattern of life. When resting underwater, a hippo can surface to breathe and sink again, with minimal sign of waking, guided by reflex and long-practiced bodily control. This allows sleep and respiration to cooperate in a place that would not permit either alone. A large hippo may be around 10 to 16 feet long, or 3 to 5 meters, and weigh several thousand pounds. Yet it can move through this breathing cycle with the quiet regularity of a pendulum. The river becomes more than habitat. It becomes a slow mechanical partner. Even in sleep, the hippo rises and falls to the surface, as faithful to air as the moon is to tide. Chimpanzees build a fresh sleeping nest almost every night. In forests and woodlands, a chimpanzee's day is spent traveling, feeding, grooming, and negotiating rich social bonds. But evening brings an act of quiet craftsmanship. Using branches, leaves, and smaller twigs, chimpanzees usually construct a nest in a tree, bending and weaving the materials into a platform sturdy enough for the night's rest. Young individuals often learn this skill by watching older chimpanzees, turning nest building into both tradition and technique. An adult chimpanzee may stand around 3 to 5.5 feet tall, or roughly 1 to 1.7 meters when upright, though that posture is not how it usually moves. The nest is more than a place to sleep. It is architecture renewed daily, a small expression of foresight and bodily knowledge. Long before humans made mattresses, one of our closest relatives was already shaping the forest into bedrooms, leaf by leaf, beneath the darkening canopy. Orangutans make elaborate sleeping nests in trees, and some even add pillows, blankets, or roof-like covers from branches and leaves. High in the rainforests of Borneo and Sumatra, orangutans live a life of remarkable patience and precision. Their long arms and powerful hands carry them through the canopy, where they feed, travel, and rest among the branches. Each evening, an orangutan usually constructs a nest by bending and interlocking branches into a secure platform, then often adds softer material for comfort. In wet weather, some have been observed arranging extra vegetation overhead or around the body, creating something like a simple shelter. An adult male can stretch over 4 feet tall, or about 1.2 to 1.5 meters, and with those long arms seem even larger in the trees. Sleep here becomes a craft of tenderness. The orangutan does not merely occupy the forest, it arranges it, making a chamber from living wood and turning the canopy into a place of deliberate rest. Sea turtles can sleep underwater for hours, slowing their bodies in calm marine shelter. Though they breathe air like all reptiles, sea turtles have a metabolism and oxygen use that allow long stretches beneath the surface, especially when resting. They often sleep wedged under ledges, tucked into reef crevices, or settled on the seafloor where currents are gentle. Depending on species, temperature, and activity, a resting turtle may remain submerged for several hours before surfacing for air. Green sea turtles, for example, can reach around 3 to 4 feet in shell length, or about 1 to 1.2 meters, and yet can disappear into quiet corners of the reef with surprising grace. Their sleep is not the hurried pause of a creature on the edge of panic. It is deliberate and measured, a reptilian calm drawn out across the water. In the turtle, time itself seems to lengthen. Even breathing becomes occasional, like a distant bell sounding over a very old sea. Young owls sometimes sleep lying face down because their heads are too heavy to hold up for long. Nestling owls enter the world carrying one of the family's defining treasures almost immediately: a large head with large eyes, packed with the equipment for future nocturnal precision. But early in life, that splendid design creates an awkward problem. Very young owlets do not yet have the neck strength and balance to keep that heavy head upright for extended periods, so they may rest with the body down and the face turned to the side against the nest. It looks startlingly like a tiny feathered collapse, but it is perfectly normal. Depending on species, an owlet may be only a few inches tall at that stage, or several centimeters, a small and vulnerable bundle of fluff and oversized anatomy. There is a touching honesty in this posture. Before becoming the poised night hunter of story and silhouette, the young owl must first sleep like a creature still growing into its own magnificent proportions. Ants do not take one long nightly sleep, because many ants rest through many short bouts scattered across the day. An ant colony can look like uninterrupted labor made visible, a civilization of ceaseless motion flowing through soil, wood, or leaf litter. But careful study has shown that ants do rest. Workers typically pause in many brief episodes rather than sinking into one long consolidated sleep, while queens in some species can experience longer and more regular resting periods. In effect, the colony's apparent sleeplessness is achieved by staggering rest among thousands of individuals, so the whole society keeps functioning while each member takes its turn in quiet. A worker ant may be only 1/4 of an inch long, or about 6 millimeters, depending on species, and yet it participates in a social schedule of astonishing complexity. Sleep here becomes distributed, almost architectural. The colony never seems to close its eyes, because its eyes are many, and they do not all close at once. Jumping spiders appear to have a sleep-like state, with rapid eye movements and twitching limbs. In the miniature landscapes of leaves, bark, and windowsills, jumping spiders live as visual hunters, relying on excellent eyesight rather than webs to track the world. Their principal eyes are large and forward-facing, and inside the head, the retinal tubes can move to scan a scene. Researchers studying young jumping spiders noticed that during nightly rest, the spiders sometimes hung motionless from silk and then entered active episodes with curling legs, body twitches, and especially rhythmic retinal movements visible through the more translucent bodies of juveniles. This resembles the active phases of sleep seen in many other animals, though scientists remain careful about how far the comparison should go. A jumping spider may be only 1/4 to 3/4 of an inch long, or about 6 to 18 millimeters, yet its sleeping behavior opens large questions. Even in a creature so small, the night is not always blank. It may ripple with hidden inner motion. Fat-tailed dwarf lemurs hibernate, making them the only primates known to truly hibernate for extended periods. In Madagascar's seasonal forests, life can swing sharply between abundance and hardship. The fat-tailed dwarf lemur meets that challenge by storing fat and then entering a prolonged hibernation-like state during the cooler, drier part of the year. This is extraordinary because primates, the group that includes monkeys, apes, and humans, are not generally known for true hibernation. During this long retreat, the lemur may shelter in a tree hole and let its metabolism drop dramatically, surviving on stored energy. Yet, as with other hibernators, this is not ordinary sleep stretched thin. It is a distinct physiological state with its own rhythms and periodic changes. The animal itself is tiny, around 7 to 8 inches long, or 18 to 20 centimeters without the tail, but its biological significance is immense. In this little lemur, primate history bends in an unexpected direction, and winter becomes a chamber of suspended time. Male pectoral sandpipers can function on astonishingly little sleep during the Arctic breeding season. In the far northern summer, daylight lingers, and the breeding window is brief, so time becomes unusually precious. Male pectoral sandpipers compete intensely for mates, displaying, patrolling, and seizing opportunities in a season that seems to race against itself. Researchers found that some males sleep very little during this period, sometimes only a small fraction of what might be expected, and that the male sleeping least could sire the most offspring. This does not mean sleep stops mattering. Rather, It shows how powerfully reproduction can reshape behavior for a short and demanding span. A pectoral sandpiper is only about 8 to 9 inches long, or 20 to 23 centimeters. A modest bird carrying out a dramatic biological bargain beneath the midnight sun. In that brief Arctic blaze, sleep is compressed almost to a whisper. The season asks for urgency, and the sandpiper answers with wakefulness bright as the endless day. Northern elephant seals sleep while sinking through the dark water in what scientists call sleep dives. At sea, these great migrants live under a stern arithmetic of time, because they must hunt, travel, avoid predators, and still somehow pay their debt to sleep. The solution is astonishingly precise. Instead of sleeping long at the surface, they often descend hundreds of meters into safer darkness, drift downward in a slow spiral, and slip into short episodes of real sleep. These underwater naps are brief, often only about 10 minutes within a much longer dive, and over an entire day at sea, they may add up to only around 2 hours. On land, by contrast, elephant seals can sleep far more. The animal is not sleepless, only strategic. It carries its bedroom downward, below the bright zone where danger sees best, and lets the sea itself become a descending chamber of rest. Blind Mexican cave fish have evolved to sleep far less than their surface-dwelling relatives. In the underground rivers and limestone chambers where these fish live, light has vanished, food can be scarce, and the ordinary schedules of day and night have been rewritten by stone. Over time, several cave populations independently converged on the same strange outcome, much less sleep. Compared with surface fish, cave fish may rest for only a fraction as long, suggesting that natural selection repeatedly favored wakefulness in darkness. Later work linked part of this sleep loss to heightened hypocretin, also called orexin, a signaling system associated with arousal. In a cave, staying active longer may mean finding the next rare meal. So the fish did not simply lose eyes, it also loosened sleep's hold. Evolution here feels less like a sculptor removing features and more like a patient editor, trimming rest itself to fit a world where opportunity arrives rarely and must be seized at once. Honeybees lose some of their famous precision when sleep is taken away. A hive can seem like perfect organization made audible, every worker departing, returning, feeding, and signaling with astonishing economy. One of its finest instruments is the waggle dance, through which a forager tells nestmates where food lies relative to the sun. Yet that delicate map depends on sleep. Experiments showed that when honeybees were deprived of normal rest, the directional components of their dances became less precise. The message was still there, but its compass grew blurrier, like a whispered set of directions given by someone who had not quite recovered from the night. This matters because the colony's foraging efficiency depends on accurate communication, not just energetic wings. Sleep in bees is therefore not decorative downtime. It protects the quality of shared knowledge. Even in a creature so small, rest helps keep society aligned, turning private stillness into public clarity the next day. Jumping spiders appear to have a rapid eye movement-like sleep state, complete with twitching legs and shifting retinas. By day, these tiny hunters are all vision and calculation, stalking prey without webs and leaping with exquisite control. Their forward-facing eyes give them a kind of miniature vertebrate intensity, rare among invertebrates. At night, juvenile jumping spiders have been observed hanging from silk in quiet rest, then entering recurring bouts in which the retinal tubes behind their eyes move rhythmically while the legs curl and twitch. Because the young have more translucent exoskeletons, these hidden eye movements can actually be seen. Researchers are careful not to leap too quickly from REM-like behavior to claims about dreams, but the pattern is compelling. The sleeping spider is not blank or inert. It seems to pass through a structured inner weather, a small nocturnal cycle with its own cadence. In such a creature, the night does not erase complexity. It preserves it in miniature. The tiny worm Caenorhabditis elegans enters a true sleep-like state before each molt. Its body is nearly transparent. Its nervous system has only a few hundred neurons. And yet, even here, the ancient grammar of sleep appears. Before progressing from one larval stage to the next, the worm passes through a period called lethargus, during which movement declines, responsiveness drops, and the animal can be awakened, but prefers not to be disturbed. It is not mere stillness. It is regulated quiescence with features that echo sleep across much larger creatures. Later studies showed that this state has homeostatic properties as well, meaning it participates in the same broad logic that makes lost sleep matter in flies, fish, birds, and mammals. The elegance of the fact is hard to overstate. Sleep, or something deeply akin to it, reaches so far down the ladder of size that even a near microscopic worm pauses life in a patterned and meaningful way. Bearded dragons cycle between slow wave and REM-like sleep in astonishingly fast, regular rhythms. Reptiles were once thought to lack the familiar architecture of mammalian and avian sleep, as though the great branching of vertebrate history had invented complex sleep more than once. Then the sleeping bearded dragon complicated the story. Recordings from Australian bearded dragons showed two alternating brain states resembling slow-wave sleep and REM sleep, but with a cadence unlike ours. Instead of long cycles, the lizard's pattern can repeat on the order of roughly 80 seconds under suitable temperatures, far faster and more clock-like than in humans. The result is almost mechanical in its regularity, yet deeply biological in meaning. It hints that the roots of complex sleep may run far deeper in vertebrate history than once assumed. In the dragon's quiet body, with eyelids closed and scales motionless, ancient sleep seems to reveal one of its oldest surviving blueprints. Chinstrap penguins can gather a full night's worth of rest through thousands of microsleeps that last only a few seconds each. In a noisy colony, with neighbors pressing close and predators always a possibility, long, unbroken sleep would be difficult to defend. So the chinstrap penguin has taken an extraordinary route. Wild nesting birds were found to nod off more than 10,000 times a day, with each bout averaging only around 4 seconds. Yet these countless brief episodes accumulated to more than 11 hours of sleep for each hemisphere. The feat feels almost paradoxical. Sleep, which in human life seems to arrive as a single great tide, here falls as a rain of droplets. The penguin never appears to disappear fully into the night, and still the total is there, assembled bead by bead. On the Antarctic edge, rest becomes modular, chopped into fragments fine enough to fit between watchfulness, parental duty, and the rough company of the colony. Newborn dolphins and killer whales, along with their mothers, can remain continuously active for weeks after birth. In the first days of life, a calf must keep moving through the water, rise for air, stay close to its mother, and master a world where stopping would be dangerous. Studies of bottlenose dolphins and killer whales revealed something remarkable. Both calves and mothers show almost no obvious sleep behavior during the early postpartum period, often for weeks. They swim, surface, and maintain near constant motion, and only later does more typical sleep behavior gradually emerge. This is one of the strangest exceptions in the animal kingdom, because it shows that even a process as fundamental as sleep can be deferred under extreme developmental pressure. Yet the postponement is not permanent. It is a carefully bounded beginning, a newborn season of movement. In cetaceans, life starts not in stillness, but in a long, bright corridor of wakefulness shared by mother and child. Northern fur seals can nearly eliminate REM sleep when they are in seawater, and they show little urge to make it up later. These seals live in two profoundly different worlds, and sleep changes with the setting. On land, fur seals show both non-REM and REM sleep, much like other mammals. In water, however, their sleep becomes asymmetric and aquatic, and REM can be drastically reduced or almost absent for days or even weeks. That matters because REM sleep is often treated as a deeply necessary part of the mammalian package. Yet fur seals challenge that assumption. When they return to baseline conditions, they display little or no large REM rebound, suggesting that aquatic life has radically reshaped what kinds of sleep they can afford. The seal therefore carries two nighttime rulebooks, one for shore and one for sea. Its brain does not insist on one universal pattern. It listens to the water, and the water changes the terms. Draftboard sharks now provide some of the clearest physiological evidence that sharks really do sleep. For a long time, shark sleep lived partly in the realm of inference, suggested by behavior but difficult to pin down with physiology. The draftboard shark has helped anchor that question. Researchers found that when these New Zealand sharks entered their quiescent state, oxygen use dropped and muscle tone became lowest, providing measurable signatures that distinguish sleep from simple quiet wakefulness. That matters because it moves shark sleep from legend toward laboratory certainty. The shark resting on the seafloor is not merely pausing like a machine in standby. Its body is entering a distinct biological condition, one tied to energy conservation and the deeper logic of rest. There is something quietly grand in that confirmation. Even an animal built from old cartilage, old lineages, and old fears keeps an inward appointment with sleep, however alien the posture may look to us. Caribbean flamingos engage in unihemispheric sleep, and that sleep is not simply the same thing as standing on one leg. Flamingos are often reduced to a single memorable silhouette, the one-legged sleeper in pink. But their sleep is more intricate than posture alone suggests. Studies found evidence that Caribbean flamingos can sleep with one hemisphere more deeply at rest than the other, placing them within the wider avian world of asymmetric vigilance. Importantly, this one-sided sleep did not map neatly onto unipedal resting or lateral neck resting behavior, meaning the elegant pose and the split brain rest are related to the same broad life of caution and efficiency, but are not interchangeable facts. The flamingo stillness is therefore layered. Outside, a calm and statuesque bird. Inside, a brain capable of dividing night into unequal halves. Their beauty can tempt us into oversimplification. Yet the truth is finer. Even in repose, the flamingo is not a single gesture, but several overlapping strategies held in one balanced body. Zebra finches seem to rehearse song-related brain activity while they sleep. By day, a young finch listens, practices, stumbles, and gradually shapes its voice toward the patterned song of an adult tutor. At night, the brain does not simply go dark on that effort. Research on zebra finches has shown that sleep is deeply involved in vocal learning, and neural activity recorded during sleep suggests replay or reactivation of song-related patterns. Later work has refined that picture, showing rich sleep replay dynamics across the song system. This makes the sleeping bird feel almost like a hidden musician, repeating phrases without sound while the body remains still. The idea is lovely, but it is also exacting biology. Song is not mastered in the daylight alone. Sleep helps consolidate and reshape what practice has begun. In the zebra finch, the night is a second classroom, one without audience or applause, where memory keeps tuning the instrument in silence. Male solitary bees often sleep in flowers or gather in little sleeping clusters on stems and dry blossoms. Without a hive to retreat to, many males must improvise their lodging each evening. Some clasp a stem or twig with their jaws, hanging in rows like tiny ornaments after the day's patrols are done. Others settle inside flowers, using petals as a temporary chamber until morning. Researchers have documented such male sleeping aggregations in several bee groups, though the full reasons for the gatherings are still not completely understood. Shelter, warmth, site fidelity, and proximity to females may all play roles depending on the species. The effect is enchanting. A patch of ordinary vegetation, overlooked by daylight eyes, becomes at dusk a dormitory of folded wings and patient antennae. These bees do not build walls around their sleep. They borrow them from the landscape, trusting a stem, a flower, or a dry inflorescence to hold the night around them. The common poor will does not merely sleep through cold spells, because it can enter a prolonged torpor so deep it resembles hibernation. Among birds, that is a rare and famous achievement. In the dry landscapes of western North America, the poor will feeds on insects when the season is kind. But when cold weather strips the air of prey, it can retreat into a state of drastically reduced metabolism, lowered body temperature, slowed breathing, and long stillness. This state may last for days or even weeks, making the poor will the classic example of a bird capable of extended hibernation-like torpor. It is important to keep the distinction clear. Torpor is not ordinary sleep stretched longer. It is a more radical descent, a temporary bargain with winter itself. Yet in the broad story of animal rest, it belongs near sleep's borderlands, where life lowers its flame without extinguishing it. The poor will spends winter not absent, but exquisitely reduced. Hummingbirds survive many nights by entering torpor, a state far deeper than ordinary sleep. All day they burn through nectar with astonishing speed, beating their wings so fast that waking life itself seems extravagant. But that brilliance has a cost. At night, especially when energy reserves are low or conditions are cold, many hummingbirds lower their metabolic rate and body temperature dramatically, conserving fuel until dawn. Field studies and reviews show that torpor is widespread in hummingbirds, and in some high-elevation species, the drop can be extreme. This is not simple slumber beneath a leaf. It is physiological austerity, a deliberate slowing of the furnace at the center of a tiny body. The hummingbird therefore lives between two tempos, blazing daylight and carefully dimmed darkness. It is one of nature's clearest reminders that rest is not always one thing. Sometimes it is sleep. Sometimes, in a body so costly to run, it becomes an emergency art of cooling almost to silence. great tits often spend winter nights roosting in cavities and nest boxes, because shelter itself changes the cost of sleep. For a small bird in cold weather, darkness is not just a time without light. It is a long fast in freezing air. Roosting inside a cavity can reduce heat loss and lower the energetic burden of surviving until morning, which is why great tits and similar birds often seek enclosed night shelters. Yet a warm bedroom is not the whole calculation. Roosting birds are less able to detect and escape predators, so the chosen site must balance insulation against danger. Studies of nest box use and predator cues show that these little birds weigh such trade-offs carefully. Their sleep is therefore a winter economics of wood and feather, draft and risk. The tit entering a cavity at dusk is not only looking for darkness, it is selecting the shape of its chances until dawn, choosing a shelter where a small body may spend less of itself on the cold. Amazonian manatees wake briefly for every breath even during sleep, and their brains can show interhemispheric asynchrony while resting. This makes their sleep feel less like a plunge into unconsciousness and more like a rhythm of repeated near emergence. In one of the earliest detailed studies of Sirenian sleep, researchers found a pronounced circadian pattern, short awakenings tied to each respiratory act, and electrical differences between the two brain hemispheres during slow-wave sleep. That pattern places manatees alongside other aquatic mammals that have reshaped sleep to meet the demands of air breathing in water. The sleeper must never entirely forget the surface, so the sleeping manatee rises and falls through a chain of tiny thresholds, each breath a brief return before the next descent into rest. It is an elegant compromise. The river does not release the animal from mammalian needs, and the mammal does not abandon the river. Between those facts, sleep becomes a breathing mosaic. Adult zebrafish not only sleep, they prefer particular resting places and show rebound sleep after deprivation. These little striped fish are easy to underestimate because their sleep is almost theatrically understated. There are no eyelids to close, no nest to fluff, and no mammalian stretch before surrender. Yet experiments demonstrated a genuine sleep state marked by immobility, increased arousal threshold, and place preference, meaning the fish often return to favored resting locations. When researchers gently prevented that sleep, the fish later slept more, showing a classic rebound effect. This homeostatic response is one of the clearest signatures that the state is real sleep, rather than mere inactivity. In zebrafish, then, sleep announces itself not with drama, but with rules. The fish settles, becomes harder to rouse, and later compensates when rest has been denied. Even in a transparent aquarium world, where everything seems visible, one of biology's deeper invisibilities remains: the accumulated need to sleep. European jackdaws reveal that asymmetric sleep has limits, because when they become too tired, they shift toward deeper, more symmetrical sleep. Birds often use asymmetric or unihemispheric sleep to preserve some vigilance while still resting, a sensible solution in a world of predators and exposure. But recent high-density recordings in jackdaws showed that this compromise is not infinitely flexible. After sleep deprivation, the birds spent more time in deep, symmetrical sleep, especially early in the night when the pressure to recover was greatest. In other words, the brain eventually demands fuller surrender from both hemispheres at once. That result is quietly profound. It suggests that one-sided vigilance is a useful bargain, but not a free one. Sleep can be split to meet danger, yet only up to a point. past that threshold, recovery outweighs surveillance. The jackdaw, black and clever in daylight, becomes at night a witness to sleep's authority. Even caution must sometimes yield to the deeper claim of restoration. Domestic chicks can sleep with one eye open and one brain hemisphere more awake than the other. This may sound like a trick reserved for seabirds and dolphins, but it extends into much humbler barnyard life. Studies and reviews of avian sleep show that domestic chicks display both bilateral sleep and monocular, unihemispheric forms in which one eye remains open while the opposite hemisphere stays relatively alert. That asymmetry can interact with how birds process information and maintain awareness, adding another layer to the already rich lateralization of the avian brain. The sight of a chick appears simple from the outside. Soft feathers gathered into a small, quiet shape. Yet within that body, sleep can be divided, negotiated, and distributed unevenly across the skull. It is a gentle reminder that sophistication in biology does not always wear a grand costume. Sometimes it stands in straw, barely larger than a hand, keeping half a watch even while half the brain sleeps. Northern elephant seals sleep during deep drift dives far below the surface. On the open ocean, these enormous travelers face a difficult equation because they must feed, avoid predators, and still pay their debt to sleep. Researchers found that wild northern elephant seals often descend to around 1,000 feet, or about 300 meters, and slip into short sleep bouts while slowly spiraling downward through darker water. At sea, all of those brief episodes together may amount to less than 2 hours of sleep in a day, while on land, they can sleep far more generously. The image is extraordinary. A body built for long migration carrying its sleep downward like a lantern lowered into a well. A large female may stretch roughly 8 to 10 feet long, or 2.5 to 3 meters, yet her most delicate behavior may be this time surrendered to the deep. Sleep here is not a room. It is a falling motion, carefully hidden inside the sea. Blind Mexican cavefish have evolved to sleep far less than their surface-dwelling relatives. In the lightless rivers of limestone caves, food can be rare, and the old alternation of day and night tiam loses much of its authority. Over evolutionary time, several separate cave populations of Astyanax mexicanus converged on the same unusual result: dramatic sleep loss. Compared with eyed surface fish, these blind cavefish rest only a fraction as long, and later work linked part of that change to stronger hypocretin, also called orexin, signaling, which promotes wakefulness. A cavefish is only about 3 to 5 inches long, or roughly 8 to 13 centimeters, but its biology has become a profound lesson in how sleep can bend under ecological pressure. The darkness did not simply take away eyes, it also loosened the hold of rest. In a world where the next meal may be uncertain, evolution seems to have edited the night itself, trimming sleep into a shorter and sharper form. Sleep-deprived honeybees perform less precise waggle dances. A bee returning to the hive with news of nectar is not merely excited, it is carrying geometry. Through the waggle dance, it tells other bees the direction and distance of food relative to the sun, turning a dark comb into a living map. Experiments showed that when forager bees were deprived of normal sleep, the directional precision of those dances declined. The message still existed, but its compass grew blurrier, as if a careful surveyor had drawn the route with a trembling hand. A worker honeybee is only about half an inch long, or around 1.2 centimeters. Yet its sleep supports communication sophisticated enough to guide an entire colony's labor. This makes bee sleep feel almost communal, because one bee's lost rest can alter many others' journeys the next day. In the hive, silence at night protects accuracy in daylight, and the smallest sleeper helps keep the shared world aligned. Jumping spiders show an REM-like sleep state with moving retinas and twitching legs. By day, these compact hunters live through vision, not through webs, stalking prey with startling precision and springing across tiny distances like coiled thoughts. At night, juvenile jumping spiders have been observed hanging quietly from silk and then entering recurring bouts in which the retinal tubes inside their principal eyes move rhythmically while the legs curl and twitch. Because the young are more translucent than adults, those hidden eye movements can actually be seen. Scientists are careful about claiming too much, but the pattern strongly suggests a distinct active phase of sleep. A jumping spider may be only 1/4 to 3/4 of an inch long, or about 6 to 18 millimeters, yet the night within it may be richly structured. Sleep here is not a blank pause. It is a miniature weather of stillness, tremor, and unseen visual motion, passing again and again through a body no larger than a fingernail. The tiny worm Caenorhabditis elegans enters a sleep-like state called lethargus before each molt. This animal is almost absurdly small, about 0.04 inches long, or roughly 1 millimeter, and transparent enough that much of its biology can be watched with unusual intimacy. Yet even here, near the lower edge of nervous system complexity, a recognizable form of sleep appears. Before each of its 4 molts, the worm passes into lethargus, a period of quiescence in which movement decreases, responsiveness drops, and stronger stimulation is needed to wake it. Researchers also found homeostatic features, meaning that this state participates in the same broad biological logic that makes lost sleep matter in much larger animals. The elegance of the fact is immense. A creature so small that it might seem almost mechanical still stops in a patterned, regulated way before remaking its outer covering. Sleep, or something unmistakably close to it, reaches farther down the ladder of life than size alone would ever suggest. Bearded dragons cycle between slow wave and REM-like sleep in a remarkably fast rhythm. For a long time, reptiles were treated as though they stood outside the richer architecture of sleep seen in birds and mammals. Then recordings from sleeping bearded dragons changed the conversation. Researchers found 2 alternating brain states resembling slow wave sleep and REM sleep, but moving through the night with a cadence far quicker than ours, often repeating on the order of roughly 80 to 90 seconds, or about 1.3 to 1.5 minutes. A bearded dragon is usually about 16 to 24 inches long, or 40 to 60 centimeters, and by day it appears earthy, sunlit, and solid. Yet at night, its brain reveals an unexpectedly intricate choreography. The result hints that the roots of complex sleep may run far deeper in vertebrate history than once assumed. In this lizard's quiet body, ancient sleep does not look primitive. It looks patterned, rhythmic, and strangely familiar beneath the scales. Chinstrap penguins can sleep in more than 10,000 microsleeps a day. In a crowded Antarctic colony, with eggs or chicks to guard and constant disturbance all around, long uninterrupted sleep would be hard to defend. So these penguins use a strategy that seems almost impossible. Wild nesting birds were found to nod off in bouts averaging only about 4 seconds, yet they do so more than 10,000 times in a day, accumulating over 11 hours of total sleep. The feat feels like rest broken into grains fine enough to fit between vigilance and parental duty. A chin-strap penguin stands roughly 2 to 2.5 feet tall, or about 60 to 75 centimeters, and on that storm-edged coast every few seconds of stillness matters. Sleep does not arrive as a curtain falling all at once. It arrives as countless tiny signatures, each one brief, each one enough. The penguin gathers its night the way snow gathers on rock flake by flake, until the sum becomes substantial. Newborn dolphins and killer whales, along with their mothers, can remain almost continuously active for weeks after birth. For a calf entering the ocean, life begins in motion. It must keep close to its mother, rise for air, and learn the currents of a world where lingering stillness would be risky. Studies of bottlenose dolphins and killer whales found that calves and mothers show almost no extended sleep-like behavior during the first weeks after birth, with activity continuing day and night, and more typical sleep only emerging gradually later. A newborn bottlenose dolphin is about 3 to 4 feet long, or roughly 1 to 1.2 meters, already large enough to seem substantial, yet still wholly dependent. This makes early cetacean life feel unlike the warm, drowsy beginning many mammals know. Here, infancy starts not with long surrender, but with prolonged wakefulness shared between mother and young. It is a bright corridor at the beginning of life, one carried on moving water and careful companionship. Northern fur seals can nearly eliminate REM sleep when they are in seawater. These animals divide their lives between land and ocean, and the rules of sleep shift with the setting. On shore, fur seals show both non-REM and REM sleep in ways that look much more familiar to mammalian biology. In seawater, however, their sleep becomes asymmetric and aquatic, and REM can be reduced almost to nothing for days or even weeks. What is especially striking is that when they return to baseline conditions, they show little or no large REM rebound. A northern fur seal can grow to around 6 to 7 feet long, or about 1.8 to 2.1 meters. But its most impressive adaptation may be this hidden flexibility of the sleeping brain. The sea rewrites the terms. The animal does not insist on one universal night. Instead, it carries 2 versions of rest, one for land and one for water, each shaped by different dangers, temperatures, and demands. Draftboard sharks show measurable physiological signs of true sleep. For years, shark sleep sat partly in the realm of inference, suggested by stillness, but difficult to prove with the same confidence used in other animals. Work on draftboard sharks helped change that. Researchers found that when these New Zealand sharks entered their resting state, muscle tone was lowest, metabolic rate dropped, and posture flattened, all pointing toward a distinct sleep condition rather than simple inactivity. A draftboard shark is usually about 3 to 4 feet long, or roughly 1 to 1.2 meters, not a giant, but large enough to make the conclusion feel substantial. The shark lying quiet on the seafloor is not merely idling like a machine. Its body has crossed a threshold into a deeper form of rest. That matters because it roots sleep farther back in vertebrate history, where cartilage, gills, and ancient lineages still keep a nightly appointment with physiological calm. Caribbean flamingos use unihemispheric sleep, and that split sleep is not the same thing as standing on one leg. Flamingos are often flattened into a single famous image. The pink bird poised on one leg like a line drawn across the water. But their sleep is more intricate than posture alone. Studies found evidence that Caribbean flamingos do engage in unihemispheric sleep, meaning one hemisphere can sleep more deeply, while the other remains relatively more alert. Importantly, that split sleep did not map neatly onto unipedal resting or lateral neck resting behavior, so the graceful stance and the divided sleep are related to the same broad life of caution and economy without being identical facts. A Caribbean flamingo stands about 4 to 5 feet tall, or roughly 1.2 to 1.5 meters, and within that elegant frame, the night can be shared unevenly between the two sides of the brain. Even in stillness, the flamingo is not one gesture. It is several strategies held in balance at once. Zebra finches replay song-related neural activity during sleep. By day, a zebra finch sings with a pattern learned through listening, practice, and careful correction, turning a tiny body into a precise musical instrument. By night, the brain does not simply close the case and go quiet. Classic and more recent studies showed that song-related neural activity reappears during sleep, and newer work found that replay across the two hemispheres can even be partly independent. A zebra finch is only about 4 inches long, or around 10 centimeters, but its sleeping brain continues to work on a skill central to courtship and communication. The finch seems, in a real sense, to rehearse without sound. Sleep becomes a second workshop, hidden and nocturnal, where memory, timing, and motor patterns are handled again, away from the daylight audience. In this little singer, the night is not an absence of music. It is the silent maintenance of music's machinery. Male solitary bees often sleep in flowers or in hanging clusters on stems. Without a hive to return to, many males must improvise their evening shelter, and they do so with surprising beauty. Some grip stems or dry flower heads with their jaws or legs, hanging in small groups like rows of tiny pendants. Others settle directly inside flowers, borrowing petals as walls for the night. Studies have documented such sleeping aggregations in multiple bee groups, although the exact benefits can vary by species and setting. Shelter, warmth, and proximity to places females visit may all matter. A solitary bee may be only about half an inch long, or roughly 1.2 centimeters. Yet dusk turns the ordinary meadow into a dormitory of astonishing delicacy. These bees do not build a formal bedroom. They borrow one from the landscape. A stem becomes a perch, a blossom becomes a chamber, and the night folds itself around a body small enough to disappear inside a flower's architecture. The common porwheel can enter torpor so deep and so long that it resembles hibernation. In the dry hills and rocky slopes of western North America, this quiet night bird feeds on insects when conditions are favorable, but cold weather can strip the air of prey. The porwheel's answer is extraordinary. It can lower body temperature, breathing rate, and heart rate, and remain in a torpid state for days or even weeks. This is not ordinary sleep stretched out like a longer blanket. It is a deeper descent, one that places the porwheel among the very few birds known for such extended hibernation like torpor. The bird itself is modest, about 7 to 8.5 inches long, or roughly 18 to 22 centimeters. Its camouflage so perfect that stone and feather nearly trade identities. In winter, it becomes a quiet reduction of life itself, not absent, not gone, but dimmed with exquisite control until warmth and insects return. Hummingbirds often survive cold nights by entering torpor. By day, a hummingbird seems made of velocity, all glittering throat, darting flight, and extravagant energy use. But such brilliance is expensive. At night, especially when temperatures fall or food reserves are limited, many hummingbirds lower their metabolic rate and body temperature dramatically, conserving fuel until dawn. Reviews and field studies show that torpor is widespread across hummingbirds, with smaller species often especially dependent on it. A hummingbird may be only 3 to 5 inches long, or around 8 to 13 centimeters, yet it contains one of the animal kingdom's sharpest contrasts between waking extravagance and nocturnal austerity. This is not just a nap on a twig. It is the careful dimming of a furnace. In that tiny body, daylight blazes and night economizes, and sleep's border with torpor becomes one of the most elegant survival strategies in the air. Great tits often sleep in cavities and nest boxes during winter to save heat. For a small songbird, a cold night is a long arithmetic problem. Darkness brings no feeding, and tiny bodies lose warmth quickly, so shelter matters as much as sleep itself. Studies on great tits and other small cavity roosting birds show that enclosed sites reduce thermoregulatory costs, even though roosting inside a hole can also make escape from predators more difficult. The decision is therefore a trade-off between warmth and safety, not a simple rush toward comfort. A great tit is only about 5.5 to 6 inches long, or roughly 14 to 15 centimeters. And for such a small bird, a cavity can mean the difference between an affordable night and a costly one. Evening sends it not only toward darkness, but toward architecture. A hole in a tree or a box on a trunk becomes a chamber where feather, wood, and trapped air quietly conspire against the cold. Amazonian manatees wake briefly for each breath even while asleep. In warm rivers and flooded forests, these heavy herbivores move with a softness that seems to contradict their size. Yet their sleep cannot simply ignore the demands of air. Early electrophysiological work found that during the sleep period, an Amazonian manatee woke briefly for each respiratory act, and that the slow wave activity of the two hemispheres could show interhemispheric asynchrony. In other words, sleep was present, but it was braided together with repeated returns to the surface. An Amazonian manatee may be about 8 to 10 feet long, or roughly 2.5 to 3 meters. But even such a large body must keep this fine respiratory rhythm going through the night. The result is a mosaic rather than a plunge. Sleep does not erase breathing. It accommodates it, rising and settling around each breath like water, around the broad back of the animal itself. Mosquitoes have sleep-like states with a distinct resting posture and a measurable sleep rebound. These insects are so closely associated with motion, probing, and irritation that it is tempting to imagine them as tiny engines that never truly stop. But experiments have shown otherwise. Researchers identified sleep-like states in mosquitoes based on posture and behavior, with characteristic changes in body and appendage position, reduced responsiveness, and rebound after deprivation. Sleep deprivation also reduced host landing and blood-feeding propensity in later periods. A mosquito is only about 1/4 of an inch long, or roughly 6 millimeters. Yet even here the logic of sleep appears with surprising clarity. The animal does not merely become inactive. It adopts a recognizable resting form, and later compensates when that rest has been denied. This gives the night of a mosquito a more organized shape than legend would allow. Even the most unwelcome visitor in summer still belongs to the old biological kingdom of sleepers. Budgerigars have a complex sleep structure surprisingly similar to that of mammals. For many years, bird sleep was often treated as simpler and more fragmented than the sleep of mammals. Careful work on budgerigars helped undo that old picture. Researchers found consolidated sleep, abundant REM, a distinct intermediate sleep state, similar to mammalian non-REM stage 2, and a repeating ultradian rhythm across the night. They also showed that older reports had likely underestimated this complexity because constant light, often used in earlier studies, badly disrupted normal sleep. A budgerigar is only about 7 inches long, or roughly 18 centimeters. A bright and talkative parrot, familiar from living rooms and aviaries. Yet inside that small skull, the night can unfold with an architecture more human-like than expected. The sleeping budgerigar is therefore not a simple bird on a perch. It is a reminder that complex sleep may be older and more widespread across vertebrates than scientists once believed. Jackdaws give up asymmetric sleep and shift toward deeper, more symmetrical sleep when they become very tired. Birds can often divide sleep between hemispheres, preserving some vigilance while still obtaining rest. It is a clever compromise, but recent work in European jackdaws showed that the compromise has limits. After sleep deprivation, the birds spend more time in deep symmetrical sleep, especially early in the night when sleep pressure was strongest. In other words, when the need for recovery rises high enough, the brain stops bargaining and asks both hemispheres to surrender together. A jackdaw is about 13 to 15 inches long, or roughly 34 to 39 centimeters, sleek and dark with the quick intelligence typical of corvids. By day, it seems all alertness and social calculation. By night, it becomes evidence that even vigilance must eventually yield. Sleep can be split for safety, but not indefinitely. Past a certain threshold, restoration outranks watchfulness, and both halves of the brain come home at once. Short-beaked echidnas do not divide sleep in quite the way most mammals do. As one of the 2 living manatees, the echidna sits on a very old branch of the mammal family tree, and its nights seem to preserve some of that ancient strangeness. Researchers found that echidnas can show a single sleep state blending features that, in other mammals, are usually split between rapid eye movement sleep and non-rapid eye movement sleep. Later work also showed that the more typical REM signs can appear at certain ambient temperatures, which makes the animal's sleep look even more unusual. An echidna is only about 12 to 18 inches long, or roughly 30 to 45 centimeters, and yet its sleeping brain has helped reshape arguments about how mammalian sleep evolved. In the echidna, sleep is not cleanly sorted into familiar boxes. It feels older than that, as though the categories themselves had not fully hardened yet. Hydra enter a sleep-like state even though they have no brain. These tiny freshwater cnidarians look almost too simple for sleep, with tubular bodies, waving tentacles, and a nerve net instead of a central command center. Yet experiments show that hydra spend periods in quiescence, when they are less responsive, can be sleep deprived, and later show rebound rest. Their rhythm is peculiar as well. Rather than displaying a classic free-running circadian clock under constant conditions, hydra showed roughly 4-hour cycles, suggesting a more ancient timing system at work. A hydra may be less than half an inch long, or around 1 centimeter, and can cling to pond plants like a living thread. Still, its rest carries a large implication. Sleep, or something profoundly close to it, does not wait for a big brain to arrive. In Hydra, the need to pause seems to belong to the fabric of animal life itself, woven in before heads, skulls, and centralized minds took shape. Sea anemones can sleep more after their cells are damaged, suggesting that sleep may help repair ancient nervous systems. In recent work on the starlet sea anemone, scientists defined sleep behaviorally and found that when these animals were exposed to ultraviolet light or chemicals that damage DNA, they later showed a stronger drive to sleep. That matters because sea anemones do not have a brain in the vertebrate sense. They live it with a diffuse nerve net, rooted to rock and sand, opening and closing like patient flowers of muscle. Many starlet sea anemones are only about half an inch long, or roughly 1 to 1.5 centimeters, but their sleep points toward one of the deepest ideas in biology. Wakefulness leaves marks, and rest helps mend them. The sea anemone does not close a pair of eyes or curl into a nest. It simply grows quieter, less reactive, and more still, as though ancient tissue itself were asking for darkness long enough to heal. Sea hares of the genus Aplysia sleep with a distinct body posture, showing that even a soft marine mollusk can have a recognizable bedtime form. These sea slugs are famous in neuroscience because their nervous systems are comparatively accessible, but their own rest is striking in its own right. During wakefulness, the neck and tail are more extended, and the tentacles probe the surroundings. During sleep, the body contracts, the parapodia fold in more closely, the tentacles rest flatter, and the animal often returns to preferred resting places. When deprived of rest, it later shows compensatory rebound sleep. A large California sea hare can reach around 12 to 16 inches long, or about 30 to 40 centimeters, with a body like a moving piece of velvet seaweed. Its sleep is not dramatic, but it is precise. The animal settles into a quieter shape, as if its whole outline were softening into night, and in that stillness, the old criteria of sleep become unmistakable. Pond snails remember better if they are allowed a sleep-like period after training. That makes their rest feel less like a passive pause and more like a workshop hidden inside quietness. In experiments with the pond snail Limnaea stagnalis, researchers trained snails on a task and then either allowed them to enter a quiescent sleep-like state or kept them active. The snails that were allowed to rest showed better memory consolidation later, while the ones kept awake did not retain the learning in the same way. A pond snail shell is often about 1 to 2 inches long, or roughly 2.5 to 5 centimeters, and its world is one of weeds, water film, and slow muscular travel. Yet even here, between one glide and the next, sleep protects memory. The lesson feels beautifully disproportionate. A creature so humble and slow still uses stillness not as emptiness, but as a hidden interval in which experience is carefully turned into something that lasts. Flatworms sleep, and even when cut into pieces, they can preserve aspects of their daily activity rhythm. Planarian flatworms are already famous for regeneration, able to rebuild lost body parts with astonishing tenacity. What makes them even stranger is that they also show organized sleep-like behavior, including increased arousal threshold and rebound after deprivation. Recent work found that even decapitated and bisected flatworms can maintain a broadly nocturnal activity pattern, though finer details are disrupted. implying that control of rest and rhythm is distributed more widely through the body than one might expect. A typical planarian may be only about half an inch long, or around 1 to 2 centimeters, a ribbon of living tissue sliding over stone and glass. Yet its sleep unsettles neat assumptions about where a night must be managed from. In the flatworm, the logic of rest is not locked in a single head. It is spread through a body that remembers darkness even in pieces. Argentine tegus cycle between two distinct sleep states with a rhythm far faster than our own. When scientists examined the sleeping brains of these large South American lizards, they found alternating states that resemble, in part, slow-wave sleep and REM sleep. The cycle can repeat roughly every 90 seconds, or about a minute and a half, giving the tegu's night a quick, repeating pulse, unlike the longer cycles of humans. A tegu can grow to around 3 to 4 feet long, or about 1 to 1.2 meters, and by day it appears grounded, muscular, and sun-loving. But at night, the brain reveals a more delicate choreography. The animal does not simply switch off and stay there. It moves through recurring inner phases, as if the sleeping reptile were turning over invisible pages at unusual speed. In the tegu, ancient sleep does not look vague or primitive. It looks structured, alternating, and unexpectedly close to the vertebrate patterns we once thought belonged mainly to birds and mammals. Many arboreal lizards choose narrow, flexible perches for sleep because a sleeping branch can serve as an alarm system. By day, these reptiles hunt, display, bask, and patrol trunks, leaves, and stems. By night, they become far more vulnerable, especially to climbing predators such as snakes. Field studies and reviews of reptile sleep ecology show that many tree-living lizards select slender, compliant perches that transmit vibrations if something begins to climb toward them. The perch becomes part bed and part warning wire. Some species sleep only a few feet above the ground, others much higher, but the shared principle is elegant. A small agamid or a knoll may be 4 to 8 inches long, or roughly 10 to 20 centimeters, and on such a light body, even a narrow twig can be enough. Sleep here is not just about concealment. It is about touch. The lizard rests in a place that can tremble with information, letting the plant itself keep the first watch. Oriental garden lizards have been observed sleeping while hanging from a grass stem by the jaws alone. Most sleeping lizards already seem improbable, balanced on leaves or narrow stems in the dark. But this posture is stranger still. In a reported field observation from India, a sub-adult oriental garden lizard was found suspended from a grass twig using its jaws, while the limbs hung freely without supporting the body. The species normally chooses slender perches for night rest, likely because such plants relay the vibrations of an approaching predator. Yet this jaw-hanging posture takes the principle to an almost theatrical extreme. An adult oriental garden lizard is often about 10 to 14 inches long, including the tail, or roughly 25 to 35 centimeters, though the body itself is much shorter. Even so, it may trust a single thin stem at night. The image is unforgettable. A reptile that spent the day in color and motion becomes, by darkness, a quiet weight hanging from grass like a small green punctuation mark in the air. Toko toucans sleep by tucking their enormous bills into their back feathers, turning one of the bird world's most extravagant ornaments into a problem of heat management. The toucan's bill can account for a huge share of body surface area and acts as a controllable thermal radiator, with blood flow increasing to shed heat and decreasing to conserve it. Thermal studies showed that the bill can cool rapidly at dusk, and when the bird sleeps, it is often tucked beneath feathers, helping reduce heat loss from that oversized surface. A toko toucan is about 22 to 26 inches long, or roughly 55 to 65 centimeters, and the bill alone can look almost absurdly large for such a body. Yet sleep resolves the absurdity with elegant folding. The bird turns its head back, buries the bill in plumage, and often curls the tail up as well, until the whole bright geometry collapses into a compact feathered sphere. The giant beak becomes, at night, something almost hidden and warm. Wild baboons can show a kind of first night effect, sleeping less in an unfamiliar place and failing to catch up easily afterward. Living in open country, baboons must balance the need for sleep against exposure to predators, weather, and the social friction of sleeping near troopmates. Accelerometer studies of wild olive baboons showed that they slept less when forced to use a less familiar sleep site, and that groupmates often fragmented one another's sleep. Unlike humans who may repay a lost night by sleeping in, baboons in the wild had seemed constrained by ecological and social pressures that kept full catch-up sleep from happening. A large olive baboon may stand around 2 to 3 feet at the shoulder on all fours, or roughly 60 to 90 centimeters, with a life stretch between vigilance and companionship. Their sleep is therefore political as well as biological. A tree is not only a bed, it is a neighborhood, and a new neighborhood can keep even a seasoned primate strangely wakeful. Wild orangutans make up for lost nighttime sleep with daytime naps. That fact feels quietly human, but in the Sumatran rainforest, it unfolds high above the ground in woven nests of leaves and branches. Long-term fieldwork showed that orangutans nap more after nights with shorter sleep periods, and that their nap time also grows on days that are cooler, rainier, or poorer in calories. Traveled distance the day before can shorten nighttime sleep as well. A female orangutan may stand roughly 3 to 4 feet tall, or about 1 to 1.2 meters, though her reach in the canopy is much greater than her height suggests. In earlier facts, the orangutan's sleeping nest was already a work of evening craftsmanship. Here the animal reveals a second strategy. It does not insist that all sleep belong to the night. Instead, it patches the day with pockets of recovery, building a smaller nest in the green hush of afternoon and letting the canopy hold a brief, deliberate repayment of sleep debt. Wild chimpanzees can actually sleep better in groups than alone. That sounds counterintuitive, because company often means disturbance. But recent field research found that chimpanzees nesting in groups generally slept longer and with less fragmentation than those nesting alone, even though group nesting delayed bedtime and advanced waking time. The social world still reaches into the night, influencing how well an individual rests, but group presence can also bring benefits that outweigh the costs. A chimpanzee standing upright may be about 3 to 5.5 feet tall, or roughly 1 to 1.7 meters, and each evening it must turn branches and leaves into a platform sturdy enough for the body. Once there, the choice is not only where to sleep, but with whom. In chimpanzees, sleep is not a purely private act, tucked away from society. The group can enter the architecture of the night itself, and under the right conditions, companionship seems to soften wakefulness rather than sharpen it. Chimpanzees do not choose sleeping trees at random, because some trees make better beds than others. Field and biomechanical studies suggest that chimpanzees prefer particular tree species whose branches and leaves create nests that are simultaneously stable, compliant, and comfortable. Some favored trees also appear to offer smoother surfaces or chemical properties that may discourage biting insects. In other words, a chimpanzee's nest is not merely a platform that keeps the body off the ground. It is a selected mattress, shaped by trial, inherited habit, and the feel of living wood. A chimpanzee may weigh well over 100 pounds, or around 45 kilograms, so the bed it builds in a tree must hold both mass and motion. Night after night, the animal solves that problem with botany. The forest becomes a catalogue of possible bedrooms, and only some trees are worthy. Sleep here is not just shelter from danger. It is a matter of comfort, craftsmanship, and very particular taste in timber. Many wrasses sleep by plunging headfirst into sand and disappearing beneath the surface. Coral reefs by day are full of brilliant motion, but night changes the terms of safety. For a small fish without claws, nests, or burrows of its own making, the seabed can become a borrowed bedroom. Sand diving wrasses perform a forceful plunge into the substrate and then use traveling waves of body movement to bury themselves completely. Species in this broad group are often only 4 to 10 inches long, or roughly 10 to 25 centimeters, though some are larger, and the maneuver is astonishingly quick. The fish simply vanishes, as if the reef had inhaled it. Studies of sleeping shelter availability in wrasses also show how important such sites are to retreat timing and predator avoidance. In the evening, the fish does not hide beside the sand. It becomes part of it. Sleep is taken not in open water, but in a grainy chamber sealed by the seafloor itself. Cleaner wrasses show a surprisingly elaborate sleep structure, complete with reduced breathing, rapid eye movements, and odd little waving motions. This small reef fish is already famous for cleaning parasites from larger clients, but recent work suggests its nights are just as remarkable as its days. Researchers found that sleeping cleaner wrasses lower their ventilation rate, occasionally perform distinctive body waves, and display episodes of rapid eye movement that increase towards the end of the night. The pattern resembles the broad architecture of REM and non-REM sleep, seen in other vertebrates. A blue streak cleaner wrasse is usually only about 4 to 5 inches long, or roughly 10 to 13 centimeters, a slim fish built for busy daylight service at cleaning stations. Yet once darkness settles, its sleep becomes unexpectedly rich. The fish does not merely hover in a stupor. It passes through organized phases, breathing more slowly and flickering with internal events that make the quiet reef feel almost mammalian for a moment. Green anoles exposed to artificial light at night can become active when they ought to be sleeping. These small lizards are built for daylight, using vision for foraging, courtship, and territorial display, and their usual sleep posture on vegetation is one of stillness and vulnerability. But laboratory studies simulating urban night lighting found that green anoles under artificial light were more awake at night, exploring, foraging, and even displaying to other lizards after dark. By day, they became sleepier, slower, and less active, as though the night had stolen part of the daylight's energy budget. A green anole is typically about 5 to 8 inches long, including the tail, or roughly 13 to 20 centimeters, and so small a reptile can seem almost fully at the mercy of the light around it. The result is a modern kind of sleep oddity. The lizard has not changed species or habitat entirely. The city's glow has simply persuaded part of the night to stay awake. Urban peninsular rocker gamers change where they sleep in order to hide from city light. These lizards live among rocks and walls, and in natural settings, their sleep sites reflect a balance of structure, temperature, and safety. In Bangalore, however, researchers found that urban individuals were much more likely than rural ones to choose covered sleeping sites that shield them from artificial nightlight. The shift showed remarkable behavioral flexibility. The city had not erased their need for sleep, but it had forced them to search for darkness more carefully. A peninsular rock agama can be around 10 to 14 inches long, including the tail, or roughly 25 to 35 centimeters. And by day, males may blaze with vivid breeding colors. At night, that brilliance is tucked into cracks and cover. Sleep becomes an act of urban problem solving. The animal cannot switch off the street lamps, so it changes the geometry of its rest, seeking places where stone and shadow can restore a little of the old night. Armadillos can sleep for more than 3/4 of the day, and their sleep can begin with unusual suddenness. In classic sleep studies, armadillos were found to spend over 77% of a 24-hour period asleep, with waking bouts that were short, energetic, and scattered between many sleep episodes. Sleep onset came abruptly, without long idle transitions, as though the animal were stepping through an unseen door rather than slowly drifting across a threshold. Depending on the species, an armadillo may be about 12 to 36 inches long, or roughly 30 to 90 centimeters, and its armor gives it a measure of physical security that many more exposed mammals do not have. That safety may help explain why it can devote so much of the day to sleep. The waking armadillo is busy and intent, nosing through the world with purpose. Then, almost at once, it is gone into rest, folded beneath its own protective architecture, like a knight inside a very old shell. Black bears in winter dens are not simply unconscious for months, because bear hibernation is a peculiar middle state between sleep, torpor, and readiness. Physiological studies show that hibernating black bears can drop their metabolism to about 1/4 of basal levels, while keeping body temperature far higher than that of small, deep hibernators. Heart rates can fall dramatically, yet the animals remain wakeful enough that serious disturbance may cause them to abandon the den. Other work found that the bear's circadian system remains sensitive to light during winter dormancy, which is astonishing in an animal spending the season in darkness and near stillness. A black bear can be 4 to 6 feet long, or roughly 1.2 to 1.8 meters, and such a large body cannot simply vanish into winter the way a ground squirrel can. Instead, it slows magnificently without surrendering all awareness. The den is not a coma. It is a chamber of reduced life, with one ear still turned toward the world. Across tonight's journey, we have wandered through a hidden kingdom of sleep, where rest is never one single thing. We have seen it divided between brain hemispheres in dolphins and birds, shattered into thousands of tiny fragments in penguins, lowered into winter stillness in squirrels, bears, porwills, and hummingbirds, and carried into the deep by seals and whales. We have watched lizards trust a trembling branch, bees borrow flowers for a bedroom, fish vanish into sand, and primates weave the forest itself into nests above the dark ground. Again and again, the same truth returned in different forms. Sleep is ancient, inventive, and shaped by the demands of each life. It belongs to the sea, the desert, the canopy, the cave, the hive, the pond, and the coral reef. It belongs to giants and to creatures so small they could rest on a fingertip. There is something quietly humbling in that. Every animal carries a body with its own limits, its own dangers, its own inheritance from deep time. And sleep meets each one with a different answer. Sometimes it comes as stillness, sometimes as drifting, hanging, burying, curling, floating, huddling, or sinking. Sometimes it looks almost like wakefulness from the outside, and sometimes it is stranger than any dream we might have imagined before the night began. Yet through all those varied forms, sleep remains a kind of faithful return, a repeated turning inward that life has guarded for millions upon millions of years. The sleeping world is not empty. It is full of hidden labor, repair, memory, balance, and quiet adaptation, playing out under leaves, beneath waves, inside burrows, and high in the branches where nests wait in the dark. So as this long procession of animal nights comes gently to rest, you may let these creatures keep watch over the edges of the evening for you. Let the dolphins circle through moonlit water. Let the penguins gather their thousands of brief silences. Let the toucan tuck its bright bill away. Let the cave fish move through darkness. The otters float in their kelp, and the chimpanzees settle into their woven beds among the leaves. The world is vast, patient, and full of sleeping lives, each one keeping its own ancient rhythm. And now, beneath that great and quiet tapestry, your own night may deepen as well. Sleep well. Good night.